Hi there, John Moore here, and I want to talk to you a little bit about something that might seem a little bit counterintuitive, or might run counter to what you already believe. So hold on to that for a moment, and just run with me for a little bit. And I want to explain how your psychological triggers, things that are causing these unpleasant, overwhelming emotional reactions in you, are actually blessings. Now, this may not seem, how can that make sense, right? This seems like, getting triggered is a really bad thing. It's awful. We don't want it to happen. And no, we don't want it to happen. But let me explain why it's a blessing, but also let me explain what to do when your triggers come up and how to start to work with them. So, triggers or being triggered, we've all been triggered, right? Something happens in our life, we have a reaction to it. So triggered is being reactive, not responsive. Usually the response is fueled by an overwhelming emotion. So we are getting, physiologically, we're getting out of the front part of our brain and we're reacting with the older parts of our brain. Okay. And we may lash out or yell or curl into a ball. We have a fight, flight, freeze response to some stimulus that isn't in the moment a direct threat to us, right? So I watch something on TV, it reminds me of some trauma I had in the past, and I wind up, you know, going into a panic attack that is being triggered. Or um, somebody cuts me off in traffic, and I get so angry that I want to pull them over and punch them into the nose. That is being triggered. Okay. So it's this overwhelmingly out of nowhere, disproportionate emotional reaction. And sometimes we have an inkling of where this comes from, and sometimes we don't. So, a couple of years ago, I was having a conversation with another shamanic teacher and one of her students, a man named Kevin, and we were talking about psychological wounds, right? Stuff that happens when we're traumatized, stuff that happens when we're neglected or treated poorly, that we hang on to. And oftentimes that stuff is relegated to our shadow, meaning we don't look at it. It's so painful, we've locked it out of our conscious mind, but our unconscious is still hanging on to that. Okay. And in this conversation, this teacher, who's a good friend of mine, said to me, what if we don't think of psychological wounds? What if instead of wounds, we use the word teacher, right? Our wounds can be our teachers. And I said, oh, I like that. That's really good. That's what we call, and psychologically, we call that reframing, meaning we're placing a different meaning, a different frame around the same thing. Okay. So we have these wounds, but we'll call them teachers now. Now, her student, and everybody is capable of reflecting the same amount of divine wisdom. We're all connected to spirit, says to me, or he says to both of us, so triggers are like breadcrumbs from the teacher. And I said, ooh, it kind of rocked me back a little bit. I'm like, I love that. I love that reframe. And I said, I'm going to steal that. I'm going to use it, and I'm going to use it when I teach, and I have so far. So what we mean is that when we are triggered, something has touched a wound that is some unhealed part of ourself, right? And it is a signal. Being triggered is a signal from our unconscious or subconscious mind saying, here's something that's unhealed in you. Here's something to pay attention to. Okay. And in that way, it is information that is incredibly useful to our psycho-spiritual health. It gives us a pointer back to some unhealed part of ourselves that we can then go work on. Now, it may not be apparent or immediately apparent what that unhealed part is, but getting to that is the first part. And Carl Jung said that we don't achieve enlightenment by imagining figures of light. We get we get enlightenment by bringing our darkness out and examining and looking at it and integrating with it. Right. So this is where shadow work comes in. So I'm going to give you a couple of recommendations. One recommendation I have is to keep a trigger journal for at least a month. in this journal, can be anything. You need to write, you need to handwrite. And there is neurological research that's out very recently that says when we write things down by hand, we're actually processing it through more of our brain than when we type it out. So get your notebook, get your pen or pencil, and write. So, what are you going to write in this triggered journal? Anytime you get triggered, anytime you have this reaction that seems to come out of nowhere, maybe it's surprising, maybe it's overwhelming, you're going to write it down. On this date and time, this happened, and this was my reaction to it. And that's it. Just doing this starts to bring this material out of the shadow. Just engaging with this material. You're telling your mind, okay, I'm paying attention to you. I'm paying attention to what's going on here. The other thing you can do is after about a month, you can go back and review every time this happened to you and look for patterns. Oh, what's in common with all of these times is somebody was being disrespectful to me, or somebody treated me like I was stupid, or, these are wounds that you have. They might not be immediately apparent, like somebody treating you with disrespect might relate to some abandonment from childhood or something like that. But this gives you indicators. The other thing that is incredibly important is it's very easy to beat yourself up. We love to beat ourselves up, right? When we become triggered, we go, oh my God, I can't believe I had that reaction. I can't believe I got so reactive. I'm terrible. I'm horrible. I haven't done my work. I'm so surprised. I'm supposed to be this spiritual being and I'm not perfect. Um, First of all, cut that out. Just stop. Just stop doing that. Recognize that you're doing it. I'm beating myself up. I need to stop doing that. Give yourself some grace. Give yourself some self love and say, okay, something happened. I am a human being. I have wounds, just like every other human being on the planet. I don't care how cool they act in front of you. Every human being on this planet has psychological wounds that they are here to work through. Okay? So you're not unique, you're not weird, you're not horrible, nothing. And on top of that, you are whole, complete, and perfect just as you are. But there are these wounds. The wounds are not you. We want to heal them so that the whole, complete, and perfect you can shine through. So stop being so hard on yourself. Don't beat yourself up. And in fact, take a reframe, right? Remember, we talked about reframing is putting new meaning on the same thing. So when you get triggered, instead of going, oh, I'm so awful, I can't believe I did that, I'm so whatever judgment you're laying on yourself for that. First, number one, stop it. Number two, reframe it and go, isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting is going to be your mantra for now. It's okay if you have other mantras that you meditate to, but when this happens, when things like this happen, go, isn't that interesting? So treat it as an interesting thing that happened to you. A piece of information came up that you're interested in. Isn't that interesting? You can take it a step further and even celebrate a little bit. Oh, good. I had, not that you want to repeat it. You don't want to reward being triggered, but you want to uh, examine it. Now, all of this examination is going to happen after you calm down from being triggered, right? When you are triggered, it means an old part of your brain has turned on, and you are not in your prefrontal cortex. Give yourself time and space to calm down, and then go back and look at what happened and say, isn't that interesting? What happened here? Write it down in your journal. Be gentle with yourself, give yourself grace, give yourself self love. You deserve it. You deserve more love, not less. I don't care who you are. Okay? From this, you will begin to engage with your shadow parts. You will begin to engage with the things that you have locked away that were so painful you didn't even want to look at them anymore, but you can do it in a safe way. You can come to agreements with, you can start to integrate these lost parts of yourself. You will uncover power. You become less reactive and be able to respond to things more. I promise the reactivity will get less and less and less. It has in my life. I used to be an incredibly reactive person. People could set me off with a couple of words, right? A couple of well-placed words could send me off the deep end. Okay. And I was very verbal about it. Um, and I like to think I'm no longer, I am definitely a much changed man from from my beginning of this, from the beginning of this quest. And I don't take things so personally. Also, here's a pro tip: recognize that when people are doing things that are poking at your wounds, and it almost seems like they're doing it on purpose, um, generally speaking, they're doing that unconsciously. Yes, part of their unconscious wants to trigger you for some reason. They get some satisfaction out of it. They feel some sense of power over it. They feel better because you're reacting and they aren't, or they want you to react like they're being reactive. Um, there's some value that they're getting out of that, but it's not conscious. Most of the time, people are not choosing to do those things. And so maybe give them a little grace as well. And if it's somebody that you are maintaining some kind of relationship with, whether that's a family member or an intimate relationship or just a friend, you can have a conversation and say, hey, you know what? You know what was interesting? When you said or did this to me, this is the reaction that I had. I got really angry about that. And I know that's some wound that I have, but you know what? Let's not let's not do that again. Right? And you can handle that in the relationship. You can have an honest and open conversation about that. If people don't respect your boundaries and they don't respect what is triggering you, then you should ask yourself about the relationship, about the boundaries, about what needs to be put in place so that you can be safe in that relationship. With that, I'm going to leave you for today. I hope this is helpful, and I will talk to you very soon.